Hi everybody, this is Gary Larizza with Puppet Labs, and today we're actually going to show you and walk you through the process of installing our Puppet Enterprise product. Puppet Enterprise itself is composed of the agent piece, the Puppet Enterprise console, and the Puppet Master component, but also live management and a wrapper for M Collective. So right now in front of me, I have a CentOS VM, CentOS 5, and I'm going to walk through the entire process. I'm currently in the root directory, and you notice there's a tarball here that we've downloaded from puppetlabs.com. I've expanded that out with tar-xzf and then the name of the tarball, and it's actually created this directory here. I did also create a symlink, that's why there's two there. Let's go ahead and open up this directory here, and let me show you everything that comes in our Puppet Enterprise tarball. So we have three main scripts that will facilitate the process of installing, upgrading, and then removing the Puppet Enterprise product. Those would be the Puppet Enterprise installer, the uninstaller, and the upgrader scripts. Now we also have a support script, so in case you're running into problems and you need to contact us for support, that script will get inventory items on your machine, just basic pieces of information, store it in a tarball that it drops into, I believe, var temp, and so you can check that out first, see what it saved, and then forward it on to us for more information. One big note, though, about the installation is you definitely need to make sure that on your machine you can resolve DNS forward and back. This VM is called demo.puppetlabs.vm. If I ping demo.puppetlabs.vm, I get a response. That's extremely important because at a certain step in the installation process, we try to connect to that machine to check the console. And if DNS isn't working, you're going to get errors. So first and foremost, we've got that set up. Now the Puppet Enterprise installer allows for an interactive installation process. You can just run it. It will ask you questions and then proceed to install Puppet Enterprise. But we actually want to create an answers file. That way we can automate this installation in the future and also just have a script of what exactly was installed. The way that you do that is to, since I'm in the same directory, I'm going to call the Puppet Enterprise installer script, but pass the -s argument. This stands for save an installer answer script. And then I'm going to give it a name. This name is up to you. I'm just going to call it answers.txt. And we'll hit enter and start the process. So first and foremost, you can see that it's asking whether or not we want to install the Puppet Master service. In this case, I will. So I'm going to choose yes. The default, of course, up here is no. So beware of that. Next is the Puppet Enterprise Cloud Provisioner. So the Cloud Provisioner allows you to spin up new nodes in EC2 based on AMIs, or new nodes in vSphere based on templates. It's a good thing to have that on your master, or a machine that would be able to contact EC2 or your vSphere environment. Not necessary for your nodes. I will just say yes to allow that. From there, we have the Puppet Enterprise console. The Puppet Enterprise console is basically our GUI, our view into classifying nodes, viewing reports. It also contains the live management pane, which is the GUI into M Collective for automatic discovery of your nodes. And then we also have the compliance module inside the Enterprise console. We do want that installed. Since we are a master, this defaults to Y for yes, but I'm just going to put a Y there and hit enter regardless. Now we're going to set up the Puppet agent. So we need to choose a cert name. The cert name is how Puppet knows the node. So when the node checks in, it's the name that it's registering with Puppet, but also fundamentally, it's the name that's set up on the SSL certificate on the agent side. Puppet uses two-way SSL certificate communication. There's a master certificate and also a client certificate. So it's very important to choose a cert name here that will not change, because if you do change this cert name at a later date, the name on the certificate you got from the master will now be invalid and Puppet communication will cease to work. You'll basically have to generate a new certificate. By default, it's going to try and query DNS and resolve the fully qualified domain name of the machine. This is correct, so I'm going to accept the default and just hit enter. Now for the Puppet Master. On the master side, the master certificate needs to use a name, of course, a cert name, but also it has the ability to use what's called DNS aliases. These will go in the X509 OpenSSL cert. It's a comma-separated value. So basically, if this machine is known as demo.puppetlabs.vm, but also is known as puppet.puppetlabs.vm, it will respond and basically generate certificates that'll be valid no matter what name you use to contact this machine. So it's important that you use all the CNAMEs for which this machine would be contacted. This list is perfectly fine in my case, so I'm going to accept the default. Now we have the admin email address. This is used for role-based authentication control, or RBAC. So by default, it uses whatever email address you use here as the first username for the RBAC module, and then later we'll supply a password. This email address does not have to resolve. So I'm just going to say admin@puppetlabs.com. It asks me for a password. It's a minimum of 8 characters. It is the only password for which we require a complexity of 8 characters. I'm going to use Puppet Labs. Next, the Puppet Enterprise console uses a MySQL database server as a backend to store all of its reports and node information. So it's one of the few pieces that we actually require your local package repository system to provide a package for MySQL Server. It's one of the packages we don't vendor and shipped with the Puppet Enterprise tarball. So it needs to set up a new database server. Have no fear, this will get set up underneath opt-puppet. And because I'm installing the console, the default is Y. I'm going to accept the default answer of yes to set up a new database server. It needs a root user account, and it needs a root password. So I'm going to choose a password of Puppet, since that's pretty secure, and no one will ever guess that. We'll type in the confirmation password, and it asks for an SMTP server, because once you set up RBAC, after you have the first user installed, for any additional users, we're going to need to send them out a confirmation email. And so it needs an SMTP server to relay that email message. I'm going to use smtp.gmail.com just for that. It's basically a step in the process to create a new RBAC user, send an email so that they can check off and validate their user account through a link that they'll click on, and then the user will be set up. The console database name default is console. I will accept that. The database user is console. I will accept that. That's basically the database name and the username for all of the console purposes. The password for console, I will just use Puppet, and again, I will confirm that. Next is the console auth database. This is the database specifically for RBAC, whereas console was for all your node information and reports. So the role-based authentication control information will get stored in this database. I'm going to accept the default of console_auth. The same for the user for console_auth. And type in a password. I'll just use Puppet in this case. Now I mentioned that there were certain packages that we didn't ship with Puppet Enterprise. Some of these packages are because we chose the Cloud Provisioner piece. We do require the JRE that is greater than or equal to 1.6.0. So this is one package that you may want to do on your own. If you're using the OpenJDK, ensure that 1.6.0 or greater has been installed. And then of course MySQL and MySQL Server. I'm going to accept the default of Y to automatically install these packages. Next, because the Puppet and Factor binaries are installed in opt-puppet bin, so /opt/puppet/bin, we're going to create symbolic links in user local bin, and I will accept the default choice of doing that. And then finally, accept and confirm that we are installing all 4 of these components on this machine. Now, it doesn't actually perform the installation because we're just saving an answers file. And you'll notice here that answers.txt has been generated. So let's take a look at what answers.txt looks like. It is just plain text. So you do have the ability to go in here and correct any errors that you might have made during the question and answer segment. There is one thing that I'm going to change. So I set up the q_puppet_agent_cert_name question and used demo.puppetlabs.vm. Now, this is one thing that is very likely to change between your nodes. And one easy way of automating this process is you can use backticks and use any shell command here, for example, hostname --fqdn, and that during the installation process we will execute that command, and whatever is returned will become the answer for this question. Now, if you're running Red Hat or Debian, hostname --fqdn will get the fully qualified domain name. However, beware, on Solaris 10, this will set the host name on your machine to be --fqdn. So if you're using Solaris, you might want to just use hostname. And that's the only change I'm going to make to this file. So I will save that and close. And now we can facilitate the installation process by just calling the installer, this time with the -a argument. With the -a argument, we'll pass answers.txt, which is the file we just created and we just inspected and changed. And let's go ahead and hit enter and start the installation process. It breezes through the questions that we've already provided answers, and then it starts the yum process to install the packages that we didn't vendor with Puppet. So it's gotten through all of those packages and installed them. And now it starts installing the packages that we vendored with Puppet Enterprise. Those packages will begin with PE. They also include specific Ruby gems we require, the core pieces of Puppet, and any other dependencies. The Puppet Enterprise installation process will put all of this under /opt/puppet. So we're vendoring it away from your machine so that we don't stomp on your machine's HTTP or your machine's Ruby or any other things that you may have already installed on this machine, be it VM or physical. At this process, it sets up the components, and this is one key step of setting up the console. If we cannot resolve that DNS name that we had provided for the server, you're going to have errors, and there'll be an error thrown in the script, and the script will stop. So if you get an error at this point, it's very important to check DNS. Make sure you can resolve the server name that you've provided in the answers file. Next, we're going to start up the HTTP server for the Puppet Master and the Enterprise console. One difference with Puppet Enterprise is that we rack up our Puppet service through Passenger and Apache so that it's set up for scale. We don't use the built-in WebRIC that ships with the open source. So that's why the master service is started under a service called PE-HTTPD, and that's in opt_puppet as well. The final step in this process is to actually set up mCollective. mCollective is the project on which Live Management lives, and that is basically using a message queue like ActiveMQ to facilitate communication for actions and agents between the client and the server. You'll notice we've completed. Step 5 is done. We've installed Puppet Enterprise. It informs you that Puppet Enterprise has been installed under opt_puppet. The configuration files are in /etc/puppet_labs and also in a directory called Puppet. And that an answers file has actually been saved in the same directory called answers.lastren.demo.puppetlabs.vm. Incidentally, we also save another file in /etc/puppetlabs/installer called answers.install. This file has all of the passwords redacted. So if you ever need to send us an answers file that shows how you've installed Puppet and you don't want to redact the passwords yourself, we've already provided that in etc Puppet Labs installer. So that's a great piece of information that we can use if you ever need help. The final piece in the puzzle is to contact demo.puppetlabs.vm at port 443, which we can do right now. We do self-sign our certificate, so you will have to add an exception for that, or proceed anyway. And you'll get greeted with our role-based authentication control panel immediately. Now, because I had previously logged in, it understood and recognized my credentials, but if you'd not, initially you will get this screen, which you can say admin at puppetlabs.com, and then using the password of Puppet Labs, we can successfully log in, and there's our Puppet Enterprise console. We have our one node that we've set up, automatically set up with the inventory service. So there's all of our factor facts that we've discovered in the first run. And then live management has also been set up so that we should be able to discover just one node. That's the node that we installed as of right now, and that we can now start using live management to do queries for resources or even control Puppet. And that's it. That's the installation process. Stay tuned. We'll have future videos targeting troubleshooting any steps that you might have encountered and helping you getting set up with Puppet Enterprise. So from here, thanks for joining, good luck, and happy puppetizing.